Big Just Energy, the podcast with me, Shkayla Forspell, your favorite fashion psychologist. As you know, this is not your regular fashion podcast. We are getting into the nitty gritty behind the psychology of why we buy, why we style ourselves in a certain way, how we have a deeper relationship with our fashion style and sense of self. And I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest. We have the lovely Emma Edwards. So Emma is the founder of the Broke Generation in 2018 as a destination to help millennials feel good about money. And yeah, millennials, we need that. Emma is a certified financial behavior specialist and an expert on the psychological and behavioral side of money. So definitely someone I am so excited to talk to. She connects with audiences on a deeper level than just number crunching and investment returns. Instead of looking at the reasons, she looks at the reasons why we do the things that we do with money. So she has built a loyal following of over 50,000 on social media, engaged thousands of weekly listeners through the Broke Generation podcast, which I've been a guest on myself. And Emma also runs workshops and programs to help people change their financial behavior by improving their relationship with money. She engages people with everything that's going on behind their finances with the firm belief of getting on top of your money starts with getting to know yourself. Thank you so much for coming on board, Emma. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Shakayla. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to chat to you again.
I'm so excited to talk to you. You have so much going on, so much to talk about. But before we dive in, I need to ask you a question I ask all of my guests. And that is, what does Big Just Energy mean to you?
Big dress energy to me. I thought about this and I'm wondering if I could modify it to be big trouser energy because I'm a trouser girl.
Oh, okay. Okay. Go ahead.
So I feel like big trouser energy or big dress energy for me is like that indescribable feeling when you put on an outfit and you're like, this is it. Like you're feeling yourself, you're ready to give like a TED talk on the fly. And there's like certain items in my wardrobe that deliver that. And when I find that, and it's like that really, I mean, we'll talk about this more later, but that really good, like, you know, you've made a really great purchase and you're like, this was not a one-hit wonder. This is like a part of me. That is big dress / trouser energy for me.
That's brilliant. And I love the idea about, you know, making your purchase and you're loving it. So of course, like, you're going to feel good in it. And I think the thing that people miss out when you buy something that you love is wanting to rewear it. I think that's the bit that people kind of have an issue with. Like, they just like it and they just wear it that one time, but then they forget that magical feeling. And something that really inspired me, that you've done, is that wardrobe freeze. So I have just come back from holiday in Barbados and I didn't buy a single thing. I didn't buy anything because I was like, I have all of these brilliant holiday clothes, summer clothes that I always wear. Like, why would I buy something new? And like before, like past years, before I really got into fashion psychology, I would buy a whole new wardrobe. Like, do you know what I mean? Every time I go on holiday, and I find a lot of people do that. Can you talk a bit more about your wardrobe freeze? Was it super hard to do that? And what inspired you to do that in the first place?
Yeah, so my wardrobe freeze, for anyone that's not familiar with the terminology, it's like a complete nothing enters your wardrobe. So I did that for 1 year. So from December 31st, 2022 to December 31st, 2023. I had been thinking about it for a few months in the lead up to the end of that year. And I was like, I feel like taking on this challenge because I think it will really challenge me and really change me. And it did. It was a completely different experience to what I expected, but I got exactly what I wanted out of it. It really, just exposed me to all of those things that we know we do, but we kind of complicitly ignore. I experienced so many benefits. Like the first few weeks are almost easy because you're sort of on the high of the fact you've taken on a challenge and you're kind of like, yeah, I can do this. But then when I really like settled into the trenches of it, it was just really eye-opening in terms of how almost peaceful it was to be cut off from the option of consumption. As much as I love consuming clothes and, you know, taking the environmental guilt, you know, putting that in a separate kind of bucket, if we could do so freely with no financial or environmental burden, you know, I love it. But it was, it just completely changed my relationship with my wardrobe. And I was finding so much joy, like more meaningful joy with things I already had than with things that I would buy. And it really highlighted to me that even though I've spent my whole life going, I love clothes, I love fashion, I love things like that, I'd actually just fallen into this rhythm of, I didn't actually like clothes, I just like buying them. And if I feel like if you only like buying clothes, you don't like clothes in the way that you think that you do. I think for most of us, that
100%.
love of clothes is still in there, but it's like hidden under this layer of like, I'll call myself out here and say almost greed and flippancy and like a throwaway mindset. Because it's just like, there's always more. And like, you can just keep getting it. And you don't treat your clothing or your outfit or your style with respect when you're in that mindset. So yeah, it was really eye-opening. I loved it. I kind of want to go back on it in all honesty, because coming out the other side has been quite challenging.
How challenging? How can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Well, I found myself sort of being like, I'm going to keep going, but I knew that was me just kind of like gaming myself a little bit. And I'd booked a session with a stylist sort of about a month before the end, kind of locked her in for January, because I knew I'd been saving up, and I knew that there were things that I did want to add, because something I learned a lot about during the year was the mistakes I had made in my wardrobe. So like I really pushed myself to wear everything as much as I could, even if it wasn't perfect, because I think we have this almost like, oh, this fit isn't exactly right, so I have to go out and buy another one. Whereas I really pushed myself to just fucking wear it. Like, just put a blazer over the top of something, like just wear it so that you can get to know it. So I'd learned a lot about fabrics and things, and I wanted to put that into action to create a wardrobe that would last me longer. But it is, and that was great, and I added some strategic things to my wardrobe that way, and I'm really in love with the clothes that I've got. But I've noticed that the fact that the option to buy is back in my life, it's that sense of peace has gone, and you're kind of making decisions a lot of the time on whether or not to buy something. When you see something and you want it, there's like a lot of mental labor that goes into deciding whether or not to purchase something that I think is necessary to learn. But I think that being in the challenge environment, there were no decisions to be made. When there was a wedding coming up or going on holiday, like you said, there was no question. I was not buying, and I could just get on with my life. And it was really nice. So I found that having to make decisions again is quite hard, because yes, I've learned a lot and I know what to do, but we're human beings. And as we know, we don't always do the best thing for us. So I'm sort of armed with all this knowledge, definitely an increased sense of motivation, and not even really motivation, but I guess an increased sense of purpose. But, you know, I'm still the same emotional human being after a bad day or whatever, that it's almost, and you don't want to undo, it was such a great experience, I don't want to undo that. So I found that quite challenging.
Yeah, that's so impactful. And it's so interesting you talk about how you felt, because, you know, every time we buy something new, we do get that dopamine hit, you know, that novelty. It does make us feel good. But then there's the other side you talked about, like not having to make these decisions. Obviously, the good feeling you get when you see you've saved money, and then falling in love with the wardrobe that you have, which is all great. When I tell women this, like specifically women, and I talk about, stop buying things, like just maybe just slow down a bit. One of the things they always talk about is, well, you know, my weight, like it goes up, it goes down, like I just need to buy things because of that. Like, did you experience any challenges when it came to your body image when you decided to like stop buying?
Yes, I'm exactly the same as you, that every time I talk about this, the most common bit of pushback is I couldn't do that because my weight fluctuates. And look, I don't know everybody's individual experience, and I'm sure that there are some versions of that make it harder than others. But as a person with, you know, I have fibroids and I have a cyst in my pituitary gland that does mean that my hormones fluctuate and my weight will go up and down to a certain degree. I know a lot of the people that had that same experience with me said like, oh, I've got endometriosis and my size changes all the time. To a degree, I've experienced that as well, but also just like I've been a fluctuating weight gal most of my life. So hang on, sorry. I'll just start that sentence again. When it came to size and body image, the practical side, I actually found quite easy because I have changed sizes. Like I've gone up 3 sizes in the last sort of 2 or 3 years. So I had quite a lot of stuff, and I made sure that I kept I didn't do a big purge before the year. I was like, no, keep everything, even if it doesn't fit. Like I'm a big fan of keeping things that don't fit out of sight, because I think it can damage your relationship with your body image. But I was like,
100%, yeah.
I'm keeping it because I don't want to I don't want to have to go out and buy something that I would have had if I hadn't got rid of it. From a mental perspective with the body image, I actually noticed that my body image was the best it's ever been. And I'm talking in my entire 32 years of life, the best it's ever been during the year of not buying. Because, and
Wow.
I realized that at the end of the year, and it was solidified for me when I went back to buying clothes, even with the stylist. Like I've got to a point with my body where I'm all right. Like if something doesn't fit me in a store, like I'm not going to cry about it, whatever. But it really proved to me that every time we try clothes on, especially if you're bigger and a lot of places aren't made for your body type, or, you know, if you're a size 18, there's kind of a million different versions of a size 18. So, you know, how do you standardize that? We're putting our bodies on trial every single time. And even though I'm okay and my body image is still good, it was a stark difference compared to how amazing I felt. Like I was rocking around in December feeling great about my body in clothes that I'd had for minimum 13 months. And previously, I had kind of outsourced all of my body confidence to whatever new item I was wearing, or whatever new item was on my mind that I was going to get. So it felt really nice to reclaim ownership of that. And I've had to keep a really close eye on that as I've gone back to buying. Not even like partly because some things won't fit, but also just because when you're buying clothes, like you're buying them in a merchandised environment where you have a certain idea of what it's going to look like on your body, and there's that newness and that novelty. And that is like, even as a person with great body image now, that's always going to impact like the way you see yourself, and there's going to be a difference between what it looks like in your head to what it looks like on you, or what it looked like on the photo on the model or on the mannequin or hanging in the store, or after it's first washed and you've got to iron it yourself, like hasn't been steamed by the store. It's just been really interesting, and I'd never really noticed that tie between buying versus not buying as much as I did when I did that year.
Yeah, that is crazy. And I noticed as well, like this is something I've researched and talk about. When you go into a store and you're one size, and then you're going to another store and you're a completely different size, and how sometimes brands use that in order to mess with you psychologically. Like I called it humility sizing. So a lot of brands, they make you feel larger than maybe what you would be compared to a standard size that there was a few years ago. And when we feel like that, it impacts our body image. So then we engage in compensatory spending. So we're just going to buy more to make us feel better because we feel like a bit overweight. We're not adhering to, society standards. And brands do that a lot. I know Zara, a lot of people will say from week to week, there are different sizes in that shop, or they'll buy like a pair of trousers and maybe 2 trousers in the same store. They have to buy different sizes. Like it's really hard. So yeah, having that relationship with your clothes, and maybe like understanding which is for this is body, which is for that, how you can highlight certain parts of your body you're happy with, and like conceal others with certain styles. I think even like you said, getting really to grips with your wardrobe, what's in there, understanding how you feel in certain styles is so important. And I'm just so grateful that you experienced that like benefit and like that happiness with your body through your wardrobe, because I know I as well, like my weight goes up and down. I've recently quit smoking and I've gained about 10 pounds, and
I mean,
a lot of the things I'm wearing now, they're stretchy. Yeah. Thank you, that was really hard. But I'm starting to wear more stretchier things now. All my structured things are a bit hidden, but we're women, do you know what I mean? Like you say, we go through so many different things, like it goes up and down. So it's good to know that you can still have that positive relationship with your body and actually slow down on the shopping and love the things that you have. So I want to move a bit from talking about the wardrobe to talking about budgeting. So you are like, I feel like you're the budgeting queen. I actually wanted to get your take on girl maths and that whole trend that came out. What did you think about it? Were you like super annoyed when you saw it trending? Were you like, oh, all of my hard work undone? Like, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, look, social media daily makes me feel like my hard work is undone. Like I feel like I'm barking into the void, honestly, because you just get
Yeah.
so much more engagement when you're talking about buying stuff. But you know,
Yeah.
such is the algorithm.
Yeah.
Girl math was a hot topic of conversation in the finance sector. I feel like I had like this dual
Yeah.
relationship with girl math because there was, and I think there were sort of two sides of it. Like there was the first sort of side of girl math that was like those kind of silly little you know, if you return something then you get free money, or if you like
Oh yeah.
what, you know, the ones that are like if you I can't think of any examples, hang on. You know the ones I mean, like
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
kind of like if you get free
I know there
shipping
was
on
a few like,
something, then like whatever
yeah.
you
Like
spend that
if
was that much is basically free. Yeah.
yeah, precisely. Or if you spend a bit more and then yeah, you get free shipping, like, okay, well, you've balanced that out. Like you bought three instead of the one thing you wanted, but it's free shipping. But even though you spent more than you
Yeah.
needed to.
Like I
Yeah.
felt like that aspect of it I didn't really mind, like because I think, I mean, you'll probably know this as well, it's really just like a dimension of mental accounting, like the ways that we will assign
Yeah.
like benefit to things that aren't necessarily benefits, like that sort of like jokey side of like the way that our brains are organizing where money is coming from and whether something is good value or not. That I was a bit like, that's just mental accounting.
Mhm.
That's a fairly normal like psychological brain
Yeah.
quirk that we all have. I think what bothered me is that I
Hmm.
started seeing videos that were like kind of acting like cost per wear calculations were some sort of newfangled thing, even though it's, you know, been around for decades. And it would be kind of like, yeah, if you buy
Yeah.
a jacket for $400 and you wear it 10 times, the jacket's $40. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. That doesn't make sense. And like some others like that were,
Mm,
you know, watch me, come justify purchases with me using girl math. And it, like there are these, you know,
okay.
these trousers and they're $300, but they're actually down to 150. So I'm actually getting free trousers and I'm making £150. And I'm like, hang on, no.
Mm,
And I feel like that's where
yeah.
it bothered me from a behavioral perspective, because we're doing a lot of that justification silently, unconsciously already. That
Mhm.
to verbalize it and
Mm,
normalize it and trivialize it just seemed a bit unhelpful. And
yeah.
it seemed to, you know, I think that there's a bit of a quirk with our generation that if we can meme our way through all the stuff that we're doing that's not good for us, we feel better in the
Yeah.
moment, but we're still doing things that are not
Yeah.
conducive to happiness, stability, safety, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's true. I wanted to talk more about the cost per wear because I've definitely talked about that in terms of understanding the value of your clothes and encouraging people to rewear, seeing it as an investment. But you're saying it's like negative, like we shouldn't be using that.
Well, no, I think it's, you know, I use it all the time, but not to justify
Yeah.
stuff. I feel like I'll use it retrospectively. Oh, the cost per
Okay.
wear of that, you know,
Hmm.
was only $10. Or you start to think, hang on, how often am I really going to wear this? I'm probably only going to get this five
Okay.
wears out of this because it's occasion wear. Therefore, the cost per wear is £100.
Mm,
Like, oh, that's a lot. Rather than being like, oh,
yes.
I'll wear it 50 times so that it's only 10 quid, when it's like, have you ever worn
Okay.
anything 50
Yeah.
times? Like, no.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, precisely. Okay, I get it. Yeah, we only wear like what 20% of our wardrobe. So yeah, if you're doing it like that, I 100% get you. Okay. So
Mm.
right. So people they're trying to get better with their budgeting. I know we are in recession specifically in the UK. I think there's economic issues globally. You know the idea of the lipstick effect. So when there's like economic issues, people certainly like they like to buy more to make them feel good. And I think if you look at like any of the accounts from all of these fashion brands, like these beauty brands, like they're doing well, like people are actually buying. And it's interesting because even neurologically there is research that says when we are trying to buy something, we weigh up the pain of parting with our money with the pleasure of getting something new. And often when something is priced out of our range, that pain receptor, it lights up and it's supposed to stop us from buying it. However, I feel like that is just going out of the water right now, and people are just still like buying just to feel good. Like, what do you think people can do to realize that, you know, they are not going to get all of these benefits from buying something new, or understand that they need to stop justifying their spending in that way, because it can be quite damaging and get them in a lot of trouble? Like, what do you think the main things are that people need to do to spend better?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one because it's obviously, a normal emotional process to like seek relief during those difficult, periods, whether it's like a
Yeah.
mass economic difficulty or a personal difficulty, which is, why we
Hmm.
spend emotionally, because it does work. It does bring
Yeah.
relief temporarily. I
Hmm.
think there's
Yeah.
two things. Neither of them are, particularly sexy. It's always going to be more fun in the immediate sense to
Yeah.
just buy the stuff.
Hmm.
I think for
Yeah.
one, it all comes down to slowing down our decision making. We make a lot of decisions on autopilot, and so what that means is that
Hmm.
we sort of think that we are more in control of our decisions than we actually are, because we're kind of like, well, I've tried to stop, or well, I just really really wanted this thing, but the next time I'll be better. Whereas actually it's more sort of like
Yeah.
treating all of our decisions as individual processes rather than sort of vowing to do things in the future. So slowing things down is really really
Hmm.
helpful, because it helps you to understand like the process that you're going through, where that desire is coming from, how you're trying to respond to that emotion, what you think that you are getting. And then what I often kind of try and get
Hmm.
people to do is twofold. Firstly, dial up that feeling of pain of parting with your money. Like, yes, there is that part
Hmm.
that does experience pain at the thought of handing over money, but also the more we do it and the more that we memorize the good feeling we get afterwards, I feel like that neutralizes the pain a lot. So dialing that up
Hmm.
by creating what I call a this or a that environment in your mind. So when you're thinking about buying another pair of trousers, for example, in order to increase the pain around handing over the money for that thing, bringing to mind something else that you want more that you would be taking away from. Because when we're not connected to our money, that pain of handing over money isn't as strong, because we're like, well, what else am I using it for? If I don't spend it now, it's going to go on
Yeah.
bills. So really leaning
Mm.
into that this or that, creating that environment where you're very aware that every time you're buying this stuff, you're handing over your money that could be used for something else. The other kind of aspect of that is really spending a bit of time thinking about that post-purchase feeling. Sometimes I'll get people to do this retrospectively and look at a couple of things that they have bought and actually get them to face up to the sort of drop in expectations, the drop in happiness that they've experienced. Because when we're in the moment, we can tell ourselves, oh, we want this, won't make me happy. But in the moment, we're so hopped up on dopamine that we think that it will. Whereas when we look
Mhm.
retrospectively, as they say, hindsight is 2020 vision. When you actually pull those last two dresses out of your wardrobe and go, how did you feel when you were buying that? And you might go, well, really excited. I kind of thought that it was going to make me this like polished girly at the office, and I was going to feel X, Y, and Z kind of a way, or I was going to feel like, we've all got that avatar of who we wish we were. Like I really thought I was going to be like one of those
Yeah.
girls on Instagram. And how do you feel about it
Mhm.
now? Well, actually, it doesn't actually fit me that well. It's not really the length that I want. It makes me sweat like a motherfucker, and it doesn't wash well. And I
Yeah.
actually just like
Mm.
I wish I had that money back to buy something else. Sometimes, it
Yeah.
sounds really obvious and it sounds almost too um, not too easy, but sort of like it's one of those things that you can do with no tools, no resources. You can do it at any time. So it's one of those things we put off.
Yeah.
But I think that in itself can also
Yeah.
dial up that uncomfortable feeling, because we've got an abundance of happy feelings that are going off when we're looking at buying clothes. If we can dial up the uncomfortable
Mhm.
feelings and actually look at, I use the word neutralize a lot, really neutralizing that experience, because we're like right up and then we're right down. And that's what keeps us going
Yeah.
round and round and round, because we're like, I need a higher, I need more of a hit next time. So
Yes.
neutralizing that is the key, I think.
Oh, I think those are brilliant tips. And it's really interesting in line, with all this rhetoric of why millennials can't like afford property, or why we can't afford things. And it's true, like things are just more expensive. That's just a fact. But the idea of like, oh, well, stop spending money on this and your avocado toast, and we're like, oh, well, that purchase is so small, like it's not going to impact that. But then there's TikToks I've seen of people saying that they looked at all of their purchases from these fast fashion brands, from like Fashion Nova or whatever, and they spent like 10K or like 20K. Like they spent so much money. We don't realize that these incremental purchases add up. And yes, I think if we start to think about, yeah, that might be stopping you from that big purchase that you want, that new car, like that deposit, like that surgery, whatever. Like I think it's important to stop seeing them as individual and like this or that thing. I think it's so interesting when it comes to that. And something else I wanted to ask you, you talked a bit about values-based spending. Can you like explain that a bit and what the benefits are?
Yeah, I'm the values-based spending queen. I'm like a natural spender. I always have been. When I was a hot mess with money, it was always because I just loved spending it so much, and I couldn't really see any other purpose for money other than spending it. My financial perspective was very small, very narrow.
Yeah.
But with values-based spending, I think the crux of it comes down to still being able to spend your money on things that make you happy, but really interrogating what that actually means. So a bit like that argument you mentioned of, yes, there's a fine line between what we're saying here and what the boomers are saying just don't buy stuff and you can buy a house. No, this isn't the reason we can't buy a property. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that. It's not. That's the housing market. That is systemic inequality. Like there are many reasons for that.
Yeah.
But it's not as binary as, oh, well, I'll just blow all my money then. It's more a case of what I always say to people is to optimize your finances, you don't need to give up things you want. You need to give up things that you don't want. But the problem is our wants and our needs have been hijacked to the point that we actually don't really know what they are anymore, because there is just so much stuff to have and to want and to need all the time that it requires some interrogation about what makes us happy. And that's not something that anybody else can tell you. And that's where it really comes down to. You want to have such a deep understanding of what you value and what is worth your money, to the point that it can seem completely irrational to somebody else, but you will still stand behind that decision. For example, I love hotels. I love them. I will spend I'm thinking in pounds now, £200-400 on a night in a hotel if I want to, because I love them so much and I love the experience. Whereas other people that don't value that will go, but you're only sleeping there. Whereas in my mind, I'm going, yeah, I'm sleeping there. Like I want it to be nice.
Oh, yeah.
No. So for me, it's getting really personal. Like we all engage in very, very similar financial behaviors a lot of the time. And I feel like that's where that conditioning is coming in, where we think that we want this stuff and we think it's bringing us lasting happiness, but it's not. Money can bring happiness despite what people say. Like to a certain degree, having your needs met and having a sense of choice and a sense of freedom and elements of joy in a capitalistic world that you have to pay for, that is real, but it's not the things that on the surface we think make us happy. It's also, though, not about being perfect. Like spending in alignment with your values doesn't mean that I never buy pointless crap. Like I like buying random little knickknacks for my cat. Is that a values-based spend? Not necessarily. They're just little knickknacks that I probably shouldn't buy because of the environment, and they're not, adding up to my future happiness necessarily. But it's where the scales are tipped. You can't always make a perfect decision every single time. But if most of your spending, if 80-90% of your spending is informed by these values and your savings behavior matches those values, that kind of 10% of whipped cream that maybe you do make an emotional spend, it's a bit of a whoops. Or maybe you do, buy a $20 cat bed that's got jingle bells on it. That doesn't define that doesn't define the rest of your financial behavior. As if the values aspect is there, there's margin for error, because nobody's a robot and nobody's perfect all the time. But what I find that it does is when you're spending in alignment with your values, you're really getting longer term mileage, and you're not stuck on that hamster wheel to the point that your wants almost decline over time rather than just keep refilling themselves over and over again.
Oh, that's so helpful. Is there like a specific rule you follow for like when you're going to give into a want? Like, do you say like, I don't know, once a month or like once a week, or like when it's special occasion or when you've earned some money? Like, do you have a specific rule? Is it more innate? Like, can you tell us like what your process is?
I think that it can vary. I think it's finding firstly what works for your personality type. So what works for me is I will often work from, like, I try and not use specific things. So if it's clothing, because that's, largely what we're talking about a lot, I try and not go, I want that dress or that blazer. I try and work a bit more conceptually so that when I find the perfect thing, I know that that is it. Like, that is the one that I want because it hits all this criteria. So I try and sort of gather criteria for something that I want to buy before I actually buy it. And in some ways, to some people, that, it might on the surface look like an impulse purchase because I might see it one day and go, that's the one, that's what I want. But it's actually been a much longer process behind the scenes, and there are a lot more reasons around that. So there's a big criteria aspect. So it can't be something that I did not know existed 5 seconds ago, because that's usually where the worst decisions are made, and we didn't know that it was there. But I try and, again, it can vary by category, but particularly with clothing or jewelry or accessories, I try and work to something I talk about in my book, the ultimate rule, where I treat what I am buying as if I am trying to buy the ultimate version of that thing. So if I want a black blazer or a gold chain necklace, I want to look for one that meets the criteria of I could wear, that could be the last black blazer I ever buy. Doesn't mean that it will be, but I try and look for it to be the best one. Like this necklace I bought 5 years ago on Black Friday, and I don't buy gold jewelry anymore because I wear this every single day. Could I have 2 or 3 in rotation? Yes, and maybe I will in future, but I nailed it so perfectly that I wear it every single day. It's part of my skin now because I put it on every day, and I just know that I got that right. And that's when I have that feeling that I'm like, yeah, that was a really great purchase, because it wasn't like a stopgap between the next thing that popped into my mind. It was something that I wanted, and I found something that matched the criteria.
Yeah, I think that's just so similar to my 4-3-2-1 rule that I talk about all the time. Just like a lot of it is about just stopping and really thinking, like, do I like this? And I think a lot of people, they don't realize they're buying stuff that they don't see the value in, that they don't like. Like, for example, I was talking about Nike Panda Dunks, those black and white Nike shoes, and apparently now it's out of style. Like, don't wear them. I'm like, no, obviously you don't like them then, because if people can tell you that it's outside and you just refuse to wear it, you didn't like it. And when I tell people that, they're like, oh, actually, yeah, that's crazy. And it's true. You're just not thinking about it. But one thing, Emma, that I found difficult when I'm speaking about your relationship with your identity and your clothes are an extension of you, like you talked about your gold jewelry. People then say, well, okay, I want to be a completely different person. I'm going to step into this new, amazing, confident self. I need a whole new wardrobe now because this is a whole new identity. How do you tell people, yes, your clothes and your purchases are a reflection of you, but you shouldn't be changing with the wind, with every new version of yourself that you come into? How do you come around that?
Yeah, I massively relate to that feeling, and I have commentary around this in my book, actually, because I think that this stems partially from a lot of the media that we grew up consuming. It's still my favorite movie, but The Devil Wears Prada, or TV shows like What Not to Wear, How to Look Good Naked, Extreme Makeover.
The makeover moment,
I feel like our generation of women is yearning for this crescendo moment where everything changes. It is the end of history. Everything is new from this point forward. Everyone's looking at you differently, being like, who is that? And it just doesn't happen in real life. So I always recommend that people start to recognize this in themselves if they start getting that craving. And a lot of the new age self-help content really does not help this, because it's about stepping into your bad bitch and acting like the bad bitch. And from a mindset perspective, we love to see it. But if you find your financial behavior is being driven by that manufactured, forced shift in identity, stop. Because you're probably hopped up on a feeling that is absolving some sense of anxiety right now. You know, when we set big goals and we feel momentarily better and we're like, oh, okay, I feel better now because I've set these big goals, and it's just kind of absolving the discomfort and we're not actually really going to work towards those things. I find that often that's what's happening there. We're just absolving an immediate anxiety to try and feel excited and buzzy about something, and it doesn't usually inform the best financial behavior. Another sort of more logical tip there, I suppose, or more practical piece of advice is that if you were to change your entire identity, and that did require a whole new wardrobe, most of us normal people can't actually afford to go out and buy the volume of stuff we would need to fully live in that new identity for the foreseeable future. So not to like kind of make it sound really negative, but almost like talking yourself down a little bit and being kind of like, this is not as achievable as you think that it is. This is not going to make you a different person. And there's a weird little exercise that I sometimes have people do when they're sort of in that headspace of like, I'm going to rebrand myself. I'm going to have this new identity. I'm going to go and buy this whole new wardrobe of stuff. I kind of get them to talk to themselves and imagine they're their own friend and almost verbalize the subconscious thoughts and feelings and emotions that they're having, and verbalize them as if someone else is saying them. So kind of when you're feeling that, go, you know what, I actually feel really shitty about myself at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and spend that £1,000 that I've got saved up for our summer holiday. You know, the money. Yeah. I'm going to go and spend all of that on some clothes that aren't really me, but I think that they're going to make me feel worthy. And then on Monday, when I walk into the office, I think that everyone's going to turn around and gasp because I look so amazing. And you you say it out loud and you're like, oh my God. But like I've had these thoughts. I still have them now, especially being on social media. I'm like, wow, maybe I need to like glow up a little bit. So it's sort of, it can be a bit comical, but I think that actually breaking down what those feelings are and what you're actually saying that you're going to do, because it has been so normalized. We have seen this on TV and we believe that it's possible to rebrand ourselves with a new wardrobe, but it's not. Like, you're still going to be the same person, and you're probably going to regret that money, and that money can probably be used to improve the life of the person you really are rather than be used to try and change who you are.
Oh, I love that, Emma. Yeah, I guess, stop being so delulu and just maybe realize that, yes, clothes they can bring you joy, but a lot of the inner work starts with us. And I think that's so important because a lot of times people will tell me, oh, I hate the way I look. I want to dress like you. Like, what should I buy? What should I buy? And it's like, you haven't even stopped to ask yourself, like, why do you want to change? Like, what is it about your style you don't like? Like, how do you feel? What do you like? Instead of waiting for all of these external like points of validation. And your point about social media is so true, especially when you're being a content creator. You feel like you need to constantly buy. I know one time I rented a Chanel bag for like some content, and I can just tell like the likes and everything, it was so much, and it made me think like, oh, I should get more luxury, I should get more design, it's gonna do good. But I did what you said, and I really thought like, well, is this something I really like need? Like, is it like, what's the main thing that's driving this purchase? And it wasn't like I really like the brand or the bag, really. It was because of the external validation. So just that work there, I think it does a lot, just asking yourself those questions. And I wanted to touch on, you said something before about you being like a super bad spender. Can you tell us a bit more about your past? Like, how bad did things really get, and what like shifted you into this like financial guru that you are today?
Yeah, it's an interesting one to look back on, because it's sort of, I've got a lot more clarity retrospectively or with hindsight, I suppose, than in the moment. So I guess I can articulate it a lot clearer than maybe I would have been able to back then. But like, in all honesty, it wasn't that bad, but the fact that it wasn't that bad is what kept me doing it. Like, I wasn't buying designer bags that I couldn't afford. I wasn't rocking around in labels I couldn't afford. I was wearing like Primark, H&M, Zara, like, you know, River Island, maybe if they had a sale. You know, I was savvy for all intents and purposes. Do you know what I mean? But it was it was the backstory behind the spending. It was why I was spending. I was never satisfied. I would dash out and buy an outfit an hour before going out because I felt fat. I had chronic issues with my body image. various disordered eating patterns and episodes over the years, and it was all like I'd never been able to consume clothing in a way that was not outsourcing something to that stuff. And it just meant that, yes, there was a bit of credit card debt involved, and I had store cards and all of that, very irresponsible lending that is given to 18-year-olds when they first move out of home. Don't even get me started.
Yeah.
But it was the motivation behind the spending, and it felt like it was out of my control, and it wasn't bringing me happiness. And yeah, look, I'd never earned loads and loads of money, so it's not like I whittled away a 6-figure salary or anything like that. But there were opportunities that I could have had, whether that was through having savings for an emergency or traveling or just spending money on things that made me happier. But it was almost like a misunderstanding of like what money could be used for, I suppose. And it was like chasing this unattainable goal that was always, it wasn't always clothes. It would have been sometimes diet products. I was always on the hamster wheel of the new cellulite product, or makeup. I remember one time I think I spent like $12.99 on eye brightening drops because I'd read in some magazine that they would make me prettier. Like, it was a real, like, my bank statement was like an artifact of my insecurities, in all honesty. And whether I was spending on those things or not, it was really just, it was almost like a lack of self-respect, because I wasn't thinking about future me. I wasn't thinking about whether I was happy. I was only happy if I was living up to a certain standard, or trying to live out some dream life that I'd seen on TV, or trying to skip ahead to the good bit. Like, I remember I always used to really want to be in like luxury spaces. Obviously I couldn't afford to be in them, but I was always like looking for deals or ways to like get into nice places that I couldn't necessarily afford to be in. So I'd go somewhere and have like a deal dinner or something to like look like I had money. I think that's maybe like a thing from growing up, like being in that lower middle class pocket, like single parent, single mum. You sort of try and look like you've got more than you do. And as yeah. But as I've got better with money, and I've sort of reclaimed my spending decisions and developed my financial perspective, it's more of like a shift in intention and a shift in approach, to the point that I'm like, I'm in control. I feel like I control money now rather than feeling like it controlled me.
Wow, I think that's so impactful. So it wasn't giving Confessions of a Shopaholic. It was just really just like not, just like kind of feeding in, like you said, to your insecurities through your purchases. And I think a lot of us are guilty of doing that because, retail therapy is real. People do feel better after purchasing these these things, whether it be clothes, skincare, whatever. But it doesn't always last very long. And I think you said something about your future self, and it's so interesting. I recently read a study that said people who make the best spending decisions aren't those with the highest level of financial literacy. It's people who are able to engage in future thinking. And when I read that, I was like, whoa, that blew my mind. Like, you're really like you said, like sacrificing the lifestyle or the happiness of your future self for this immediate instant gratification that's not necessarily going to last long.
Yeah, it's I said something to somebody the other day, actually. We were talking about, I was saying, because I'm investing now and that kind of thing, and they said to me, oh, I want to invest. And I was like, girl, I've told you, I will teach you how to invest. Like, come on, we've talked about this. And she was like, oh, but I don't want to compromise. I don't want to give up my lifestyle. And I said, like, quite matter-of-factly, well, you either give it up a little bit now to make a little room for future you, or you give it up later. Like, that's really the fact of the matter. And I wish I could sort of go back and say to younger me, like, you don't have to give up every single aspect of what brings you joy. You just need to, one, interrogate what brings you joy, but also like just do 10% of your energy and your time and your finances for future you, because you either deal with it now or you'll deal with it later. You can't have both. You'll either deal with it now or it will hit you later. And kind of seeing that can help you with that head in the sand kind of mindset. It's a bit brutal. It's a bit of a call out. But having been somebody that needed that call out, if you really want to keep those clothes, I mean, go wild, but you could give up a little bit of them now and have a lot more down the line.
I think that's so good. I'm glad to talk about investing. I recently started like investing, but it's really scary. I like to start it, and I feel like I feel like a lot of people experience this. I think especially women, like you start looking at all of this investing content, and then you think about like crypto, or should you invest in stocks and shares and this, and I think it can become really like intense and overwhelming. And then you look at the current bills you have now, and like what strategies do you tell people who might just feel like, oh, investing is not, it's not for them, or they can't get into it right now?
Yeah, for me, so it was something that I struggled with because I didn't see myself doing that. Nobody in my family had invested, like nobody talked about that. I didn't understand
Mm,
like really what it was at first. I didn't, but even when I did understand what it was, and I believe that there is a gap now where, because there is a lot more investing education, I think there are a lot of people that are stuck in that point that I was in. I knew what it was, but I hadn't behaviorally
yeah.
connected to actually doing it. And I
Hmm.
think for me, it has come down to engaging with that future a lot more, talking to people that are doing it, or following people that are doing it and that are talking about it. It's a bit difficult over here in Australia now because we're not really allowed to talk about it online, which is difficult because of the like financial advice laws. But there
Wait,
are people in other countries that,
wait,
for all
wait, wait,
intents
wait.
and
What is that about?
purposes,
You can't talk about it.
no. It's really bad. We're not allowed. You have to have a financial services
Is
license
that a
now.
recent thing?
It was
Oh, what's
2
your
years
thoughts
ago.
on that?
It's complex. It is beneficial in some ways because there are people giving really dangerous advice, but it means that it cuts off,
Mm,
like, especially again, somebody who didn't see themselves as an investor, didn't see other people in like my community investing. Yeah, it means that we can't open that up to as many people. But luckily, the I guess the lifestyle of investing is fairly global. You can follow women in other countries that are investing. There's a lot of people out of the UK, a lot of people in the
yeah.
US that are talking about it. So it's still possible. It's definitely difficult with that distance. But I think for me, it was like inserting myself into that life, getting much more clear on the role of money in my whole life rather than just like as this immediate means of
Mm,
gratification or survival. That's really how I saw money until really not that long ago. Like it was a means of spending it when you had it, paying bills if you could, and it would always probably be stressful. Like that's just what I thought. I wasn't that engaged with doing things for the future. I wasn't that engaged. Very passive with my money. Like your job is your job, and some
yeah.
people have a good job with a good pension, but I don't, and that's just the way that it is. I didn't ever
Mm,
have that internal locus of control with, okay, well, no, I don't have a huge inheritance coming my way, or I don't have a job that has a great pension, but what can I do to look after myself? Really sort of
yeah.
looking at that, you know, how can I protect myself? How can I create different outcomes for myself? And it's sort of been quite empowering to look at like how can I break generational patterns, like not just accepting what's been modeled to me in the past. How can I like break out of that? And
Mm,
it's uncomfortable because we do create a comfort zone in what we're used to, even if that is struggle with money. But
mm,
it has been like breaking out a lot, goal setting comes into it a lot. Even like non-money content really, and like expanding your possibilities of the world, of your career, improving your self-worth, honestly, particularly as women. Exploring that is something that we can do, and that there is something different to maybe what we know to be available.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think that's so true for me. Like, there's not a lot of financial literacy in my family, really. I think there was this parted line where it's like, oh, money will come, don't worry.
Mm.
And it's like, well, that, that can get us in a bit of trouble. And it
Yeah.
has. And I think, especially like you said, when you come from that working class background and you're striving to achieve these great things, and you have a lot of eyes on you as well, and I know people see me on TV and they think, oh, you're rich, and it's like,
Mm.
actually, girl, like that's not necessarily true. But sometimes you feel like, especially you with like your massive audience, you might feel like you need to spend and like project in a way to live up to that image of yourself and live up to that lifestyle. Like, and I think just thinking about your future self, like you said, is just so important. And I think what you're doing and what you're teaching is super beneficial. Do you have any like personal stories of like people taking your advice and them like actually making such a positive change? I feel like you must have a lot of DMs of just people saying thanks, thanks, thanks. Is there anyone that like springs to mind?
Yeah, there is. That's kind of probably particularly relevant for this podcast. So I've run a couple of times, and I've done 3 in the past, like a month-long guided wardrobe pause, where you like stop buying clothes for a month, and we interrogate like what's going on. We look at like your fantasy self, that kind of thing. It's in like a Facebook group environment, and one of the exercises I get the ladies in there to do is, depending on when in the year it is, it'll either be like year to date or it will be the last 3 months or whatever. Is to go through their bank statement and add up what they've spent on clothing, and the responses to that are always eye-opening. And somebody said to me, she was like, Emma, I've realized that if I kick this habit, or if I make a small change to this habit, I could like be on my way to having a deposit for, albeit a small flat, but a deposit for a small flat.
Brilliant.
In several years, but that's what has been spent in the past, and there is that opportunity. And that's what I always say to people when they do this exercise: whatever you uncover is empowering, because whatever you found that you've spent is your opportunity number, and you can do something else with that. And people have uncovered that they could have the deposit on a small flat, or they could have an extra holiday every year, or they could pay off a bit of debt, or they could move somewhere nicer with a high level of rent rather than the moldy place that they're in now. And like, that's just a really small thing, right? Like, it was one little challenge that, made them look at where their money had gone. But seeing people realize, like, start connecting to their behavior and understanding what that opportunity number is, always a really good feeling.
Oh, that's so brilliant to hear. You mentioned fantasy self. I don't think we explained what that is. Can you just touch on what that is, please?
Yeah, so I refer to it as the fantasy self. It's that sort of ideal version of you that you often buy clothes for. Maybe they've got a different body type to you, or they're taller than you, or they've got a different job than you. I hear this a lot with women who are parents. They've got this fantasy self that is not a parent, so they buy all these lovely clothes, but then all they do is go to soft play all day, and it's not appropriate for the clothes that they've bought. So it's the fantasy self and the fantasy lifestyle. Yeah.
Offensive. That is literally so much of what I've talked about in Big Just Energy, and just having these different versions, and like looking at your ideal self, but then looking at how you actually use your clothes on the day to day. And you might be shopping for this woman that is going out to parties and to dinner, but you are mostly doing the school run, and you're mostly like going to the gym. Like, there's this disconnect there. And again, like you mentioned, it's all about being mindful, sitting with yourself, asking yourself the tough questions. And I think the insights you're giving is brilliant. So before we wrap up though, I want to get into your new book. Please tell us all about it. Just talk us through how you got the deal, like everything. I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, so my new book is called Good with Money. It is bright yellow. You can't miss it. I've been writing it since sort of end of 2022. So it was a long writing process. It came out here in Australia in February. It will be out in the UK later this year. It's on Kindle worldwide, and it will soon be on audiobook worldwide, hopefully. So it is coming to other regions. But yeah, it is a 5-part guide to reclaiming your spending decisions. So if you relate to any of that spending stuff I've talked about, this is the book for you. And just building a really strong, healthy relationship with money, looking back at your past, why you do the things you do, understanding yourself better. The crux of the book is like getting to know yourself as an act of financial empowerment. So there's like an element of shifting your financial perspective. Like I said, there's a section at the end that sort of talks about moving on with the rest of your life. Now you've got these new money habits, and that really speaks to that, like looking to invest, looking to the future, that kind of thing. I don't teach investing in the book because it is not my area of expertise, but it's sort of the principles of what it is, and then other resources from other people that you can go and learn how to actually do that. But yeah, it's hopefully the guide that will help you kind of break free from that hamster wheel of spending and feeling like you're bad with money, to come out the other side feeling good with money.
Oh, brilliant. And what was the writing process like for you? Was it super simple, hard? How did it go?
I found it so hard, Shakayla. It was awful. I'm a writer anyway, so I should have found it easier than I did. I just found it really mentally challenging. Like, putting your perspective into a book is, as you'll know, is so different to digital writing or even like a segment on TV. Like, all of that stuff is very transient, whereas with your book it really needs to be like a little package, and you can't put everything in it, but you're thinking, oh well, maybe I should mention that, and maybe maybe you learn new things throughout the process, or you come up with new models or methods or frameworks. And I've come up with a couple of things that I like use regularly in my content now, like a couple of like frameworks, and I developed those after the book went to print, and now I'm like, oh my god, it's not in there, like I'm a fraud, it should be in there. So it was a journey. It was a big lesson, I think, but it was also like a really nice milestone and a really nice way to actually sort of package up the most salient points of like your perspective that you have in what you do, and like put that forward as a contribution to whatever industry you're in. So I found that quite there was a lot of clarity that came with that, I think.
Oh, brilliant. I'm so happy for you. And all of those things that you didn't get in book one, that's just book two. Like, just think about it like that, definitely. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for speaking with me, Emma. I just found this so illuminating. I know people are probably listening to this and just writing furiously, like in their notepads. But can you tell us all where we can follow you, hear more about you, your projects, and just more about you? Where can people go?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at the.brokegeneration, because someone is still parked on the broke generation with no dot. So I have to have the dot in mind for now. My website, thebrokegeneration.com, and my podcast, The Broke Generation Podcast, where I talk all about these kinds of things: developing your financial perspective, unpacking your financial psychology, building positive money belief, positive relationship with money, etc.
Oh, brilliant. Make sure you go and follow Emma. This was a very illuminating episode of the Big Just Energy podcast. I know I'm definitely going to be thinking way more about my spending habits. I know you probably are too. If you want to learn more about fashion psychology, make sure you hit us up on fashionisspsychology.com, where we have new research, new insights. You can see all about our new podcast. And of course, you can find out about our fashion psychology course. The introductory course is still available, so make sure you check it out. And make sure you follow us on Instagram, Fashion is Psychology, and me on Instagram at Shakayla Elise. And we will see you next week. Thank you guys, and thanks, Emma.